It was a cold and lonely night. The wind whistled through the trees while the full moon cast a pale glow over the deserted road. The stars seemed more distant than ever, and the darkness enveloped everything around, making the scene even more mysterious and unsettling. Lucas, an experienced taxi driver, was finishing his night shift. He knew every street, every shortcut in the city, but that deserted road had a different, almost supernatural feel to it. His headlights illuminated the path ahead, but the feeling of solitude persisted. He turned on the radio to break the silence, but the soft music only amplified the sense of isolation. As he drove, his mind wandered. He thought about his family, how much he missed his grandmother who had disappeared so many years ago. It was a mystery that had never been solved, and the pain of the loss still burned in his heart. He sighed, trying to push away the sad thoughts and focus on the road. Suddenly, something caught his attention. A solitary figure was standing by the roadside, desperately signaling for help. Lucas felt a chill run down his spine, but slowed down and stopped the car. The figure approached, revealing itself to be a fragile and apparently disoriented elderly woman. The woman was poorly dressed for the cold, with a thin shawl covering her shoulders. Her eyes reflected a mix of fear and relief when she saw the taxi stop. Lucas rolled down the window and asked if she needed help. The woman nodded, explaining that she was lost and needed a ride to somewhere safe. Lucas felt a strange sense of déjà vu, but opened the door for her to get in. As the elderly woman settled into the back seat, he couldn't help but notice the sad expression on her face and the tremor in her hands. The deserted road seemed even longer now, with the woman's silent presence beside him. As the car moved through the night, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that there was something familiar about her. The surrounding darkness seemed to close in even more, as if fate was about to reveal a long-hidden secret. The elderly woman got into the taxi with difficulty, her movements slow and careful as if each step required monumental effort. Lucas watched through the rearview mirror as she adjusted herself in the back seat, pulling the shawl tighter around her to shield herself from the biting cold. There was an aura of both fragility and resilience about her, something he couldn't quite explain. He turned his attention back to the road, trying to ignore the growing unease inside him. The woman, meanwhile, was silent, staring intently at the darkness outside. The only sounds were the hum of the engine and the occasional whisper of the wind. After a few minutes, Lucas broke the silence. "Are you all right? Do you want me to take you somewhere specific?" The elderly woman seemed to hesitate, as if trying to remember something. I'm not exactly sure where I am," she said in a trembling voice. "I only know that I need to find a safe place." Her response heightened Lucas's unease. He looked at her again, noticing details that seemed strangely familiar. The shape of her eyes, the way she held the shawl. There was something about her he couldn't quite place, but it made him uncomfortably close to a distant memory. As he drove, he tried to start a conversation to better understand the situation. "Do you live around here? Is there someone we can call to help you?" The woman sighed, a look of sadness taking over her face. "I don't know. I feel like I've been lost for a long time. I can't remember anything." Lucas felt a lump in his throat. The idea of someone wandering with no memory, not knowing where to go, was too painful for him. And deep in his mind, something was starting to form, a connection he couldn't yet see clearly. They remained silent for a few more minutes until finally, the elderly woman spoke again. "My name is Stella. Stella dos Santos." Lucas almost lost control of the car. The name hit him like a lightning bolt, and he had to pull the taxi over to the side of the road to process what he had just heard. If you're enjoying the story so far, leave a like and comment below what you would do. Subscribe to our channel for more stories like this. Stella dos Santos? He turned to look directly at her, his heart racing in his chest. "Did you say Stella dos Santos?" She nodded, her eyes filled with confusion. "Yes, that's what I remember." Lucas couldn't believe it. The name, the face, the sense of familiarity. Everything was fitting together in a chilling way. Did you have a grandson named Lucas?" The elderly woman's eyes widened and a spark of recognition appeared in them. "Lucas, my grandson. Yes, I did, but it's been so long. He felt a wave of emotion overwhelm him. "I'm Lucas, I'm your grandson, Grandma." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with unspoken emotions. Stella brought her hand to her mouth, tears beginning to stream down her face. "Lucas? My dear Lucas? Is it really you?" Lucas nodded, tears welling up in his own eyes. The unexpected encounter on that cold, deserted night had turned into a reunion he could never have imagined. The shock of the reunion left Lucas and his grandmother Stella silent for a few moments, both trying to grasp the magnitude of what was happening. The cold of the night seemed to dissipate, replaced by the warmth of the intense emotions flooding the taxi. "Grandma, where have you been all this time?" Lucas asked, his voice choked with emotion. Stella looked at him, her eyes filled with sadness and confusion. I don't know, Lucas. I can't remember anything. I only know that I was lost, wandering, and couldn't find my way back." Her voice trembled, and she held the shawl tighter, as if it could give her some sense of security. Lucas felt a deep ache hearing this. He knew he had to help her but didn't know where to start. Then, an idea came to him. "Grandma, do you remember any place where you felt safe? Any landmarks we could look for?" Stella closed her eyes for a moment, trying to concentrate. "There was a house with a garden full of flowers. I used to tend to the flowers. It brought me peace." She opened her eyes, a glimmer of hope appearing. "Can we search for that house, Lucas?" He nodded, resolute. "Of course, Grandma. We'll find that house. There must be someone who can help us understand what happened." Lucas started the taxi again, driving with renewed purpose. As they continued down the road, he began to consider all the possibilities. Maybe someone in town knew something, or perhaps there were records that could help piece together the puzzle. "Lucas," Stella said softly, interrupting his thoughts, "I'm so sorry for disappearing. I never meant to cause so much pain." He looked at her through the rearview mirror, his eyes filled with understanding. "It's not your fault, Grandma. What matters is that we're together now, and we'll figure this out together." Lucas's determination was palpable. He knew he had to be strong for his grandmother, who was clearly struggling with amnesia that had left her lost for so long. He called a police officer friend, explaining the situation and asking for help to investigate Stella's disappearance. As they waited for a response, Lucas and Stella headed to the nearest hospital, where he hoped an examination could provide more information about her condition. The road was dark and winding, but Lucas felt he was heading in the right direction. He knew he was embarking on a journey that would require patience and courage, but he was determined to find answers for his grandmother and, ultimately, bring her back home. The call for help was clear and urgent, and Lucas was ready to face any obstacle to ensure that Stella was safe and cared for. The road ahead was still long, but he knew that together, they could overcome any challenge that came their way. With the taxi in motion, the sound of the tires on the road and the hum of the engine created a subtle soundtrack for the night. Lucas glanced in the rearview mirror, watching his grandmother Stella, whose expression shifted between confusion and contemplation. He knew he needed to keep the conversation going, both to keep her calm and to try to uncover any memories that might help. "Grandma, you mentioned taking care of a garden. Do you remember any other details? Anything that might help us identify that place?" he asked gently. Stella furrowed her brow as if trying to pull something from the depths of her memory. "There was a swing on the tree," she said slowly. "I used to push you on that swing, Lucas. You laughed so much. It was my joy." Lucas smiled, the memory of the swing on the tree bringing him a nostalgic warmth. "Yes, I remember. And the flowers? What were your favorites?" She closed her eyes for a moment as if she could see the garden before her. "Roses. Red and white roses. I took such care of them. They were like part of the family." Lucas's heart ached as he heard this. He knew they were getting closer to something important, but there was still a veil of mystery that needed to be lifted. "And about the people around you, Grandma? Anyone you knew well? Someone who might help us understand what happened?" Stella opened her eyes, confusion returning. "There was a woman, a friend. She used to come visit me. We would have tea together. She had a sweet way of speaking, but I can't remember her name. Lucas made a mental note to investigate this later. He knew that any clue could be crucial. And this friend, Grandma, did she know about your garden? Maybe she can help us find our way back. The elderly woman seemed to be struggling with her memories, as if each word was a battle. Yes, she knew. She always praised my flowers. She said they were the most beautiful she had ever seen. Lucas noticed that Stella was getting tired. The night and the emotion of the reunion were taking their toll. We'll find this friend, Grandma, and we'll find your garden. Everything will be all right. Stella looked at him, her eyes shining with a mix of hope and uncertainty. Lucas, I'm scared. What if I never remember everything? What if I never become who I was again? Lucas reached out to touch her hand, a gesture of comfort and reassurance. No matter how long it takes, Grandma, we'll figure everything out together. The most important thing is that we're together now, and I won't let you be alone ever again. The road stretched out ahead of them, winding and mysterious, but Lucas felt that with each word and each shared memory, they were one step closer to unraveling the mystery surrounding his grandmother's life. The enigmatic conversation continued, a thread of hope and determination weaving through the darkness of the night. The road seemed endless and silence settled back into the taxi. Lucas kept a firm hand on the wheel while his mind raced with questions and possibilities. Stella, now calmer, watched the nighttime landscape pass by the window, lost in fragmented thoughts. Suddenly, Lucas's phone rang, breaking the silence. He answered quickly, hoping it was his police friend with some information. Hello? Yes, it's me. What? Could you repeat that? Stella looked at Lucas, curious and worried. He hung up the phone, his expression a mix of shock and disbelief. Grandma, I think I've found a lead. My police friend said that a woman with your name was admitted to a psychiatric hospital many years ago, but they never managed to locate her family. Stella turned pale, her hands trembling. A psychiatric hospital, but why? What happened to me, Lucas? Lucas took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. They said you were found wandering the streets, disoriented and with no memory. They tried to find out who you were, but had few clues. You were diagnosed with advanced amnesia and admitted for your own safety. Stella closed her eyes, trying to process the information. That makes sense. I remember flashes, doctors, white rooms, but I could never piece it all together. Lucas felt a deep ache inside. His grandmother had been through so much, and he couldn't imagine the terror of being lost in one's own mind. Grandma, let's go to that hospital. Maybe they have more information. Maybe we can understand better what happened. Stella nodded, still processing everything. Yes, let's go. I need to know the truth. They drove in silence, the weight of the revelation hanging over them. When they arrived at the hospital, Lucas felt a chill as he saw the old, austere building. He helped Stella out of the taxi, and together they walked to the entrance. Inside, the smell of disinfectant and the muffled sounds from the corridors created an almost oppressive atmosphere. Lucas spoke with the receptionist, explaining the situation, and they were soon led to a room where a doctor was waiting for them. The doctor, a middle-aged man with a kind demeanor, greeted them. Ms. Stella dos Santos, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. We have some information that might help. He showed them an old file, filled with notes and records. You were admitted here many years ago, found in a state of complete disorientation. We did our best to care for you, but your memory never fully returned. We tried to locate your family, but were unsuccessful. Stella looked at the file, a mixture of sadness and relief on her face. I didn't know. I was so lost. The doctor smiled kindly. The important thing is that you're with your family now. With their support, I believe we can work together to help your memory return, even if it's gradual. Lucas held his grandmother's hand firmly. We're here for you, Grandma. We'll get through this together. Stella smiled, a smile full of hope and determination. Thank you, Lucas. I feel like I'm finally finding my way back home. The following days were intense and filled with emotions. Lucas was determined to help Stella recover her memories, and together they began revisiting places and objects that might trigger memories from the past. They started with the garden Stella had mentioned so often. Lucas remembered an old family home that had a beautiful garden, now abandoned. When they arrived at the location, the sight of the ruined garden made Stella's eyes fill with tears. Despite the weeds and neglected plants, she recognized the swing on the tree and the rose bushes that had once bloomed so richly. Stella approached the flowers slowly, touching them gently with her fingers. "I used to spend hours here taking care of them," she said, her voice full of emotion. "These roses were my joy." Lucas watched her with affection. "You've always been amazing with plants, Grandma. I remember running around here trying to catch butterflies while you tended to the flowers." Stella smiled as memories began to emerge from the shadows of her mind. "Yes, you loved playing on the swing," she said, looking at the old tree. "I used to push you so high, and your laughter filled the air." As they explored more of the garden, Lucas found an old wooden box buried in the ground. He carefully unearthed it and opened it, revealing a collection of old photographs, letters, and small family treasures. Stella picked up one of the photos, her eyes widening as she saw an image of a young couple, herself and her husband in their youth. "I remember this," she murmured. "It was taken on our first wedding anniversary. We were so happy." Memories began to flow more easily, each image and object bringing back pieces of her life she had forgotten. They spent hours flipping through the photos, reading the letters, and laughing at the small mementos they found. One day, Lucas took Stella to a park where they used to have picnics. Sitting on an old wooden bench, Stella looked around and started talking about the happy days they spent there. "We used to come here every Sunday," she said. "Your grandfather would bring his guitar and play songs while we sang along." Lucas smiled, remembering the melodies that still resonated in his mind. "You always made the best cheese sandwiches," he joked, making Stella laugh. Each day, Stella's memories became clearer and more vivid. She began to remember the neighbors, friends, and the many stories they had shared. The puzzle of her life was finally starting to come together, piece by piece. One of the most emotional moments came when Stella found an old diary she had written before losing her memory. As she flipped through the pages, she became immersed in her own words, reliving precious moments that had been buried by time. "I wrote about everything," she said, her eyes shining. "About my dreams, my hopes, and about you, Lucas." Lucas hugged her, feeling deep gratitude for having his grandmother back. "We're rebuilding everything, Grandma, and I promise we'll never lose these memories again." Stella smiled, a new light in her eyes. "Thank you, my dear. With you by my side, I know I can face anything." As the sun set on the horizon, they stayed there, in the garden of the past and present, embraced by the memories that had finally found their way back home. The soft evening light filled the room as Stella and Lucas sat down for tea, a ritual that had become an important part of their afternoons. That afternoon, however, Stella seemed particularly thoughtful, as if she were on the brink of an important revelation. "Lucas," she began, her voice low and serious, "I remember more about the day I disappeared. I think I'm ready to tell the story." Lucas leaned forward, attentive to every word. He knew this was a painful memory, but also crucial to understanding what really happened. "It was a sunny afternoon, an otherwise ordinary day," Stella started, her eyes fixed on a distant point as if reliving each moment. "I was in the garden, tending to my roses, when a man approached. He seemed lost and asked for help. He said his car had broken down and needed to use a phone to call a mechanic." Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. "You never mentioned this before, Grandma." Stella nodded slowly. "I think my subconscious blocked that part out because of the trauma. I invited him to come in and use the phone, but he insisted that I go with him to the car. There was something about the way he spoke. I didn't think much of it at the time, but now I realize something was off." She paused, taking a sip of tea to calm her nerves. "He took me to a car parked a few blocks away. Once we got there, I realized there was no broken down car. He tried to force me into his vehicle. I panicked, fought back, but he was stronger." Lucas held her hand, offering silent support. "What happened next, Grandma?" I screamed for help and managed to escape. I ran away aimlessly, just trying to get away from him. I ran for so long that I ended up lost. The adrenaline and fear completely disoriented me. When I finally stopped, I didn't know where I was or how to get home. Tears began to stream down Stella's face. I was so scared, Lucas. Everything went blurry after that. I wandered for days, maybe weeks, until someone found me and took me to the hospital. But it was too late. My mind was in shambles and I couldn't remember anything. Lucas hugged her tightly, feeling her pain as if it were his own. "We'll find out who that man was, Grandma. He won't get away with this." Stella wiped her tears and looked at Lucas with determination. "I think this is important, Lucas. If we can find that person, maybe we can help others and prevent this from happening again." Lucas agreed. "Let's talk to the police again. Now that we have more information, maybe we can reopen the case and uncover the truth." As night fell, Lucas and Stella sat side by side, united by the courage to confront the past and the determination to seek justice. Stella's disappearance was not just a tale of horror and pain. It was also a testament to her resilience and the strength of family bonds that, despite everything, had never broken. They knew the journey was not over, but they were ready to face whatever came next, together, with the hope of finally bringing to light the truth hidden in the shadows of the past. Lucas and Stella's determination to solve the mystery of her disappearance led them back to the police station. Armed with the new information Stella had remembered, they hoped that the investigation could finally make progress. The detective in charge of the case, a weary-looking man with a sharp gaze, greeted them in his office. Lucas explained everything Stella had remembered, including the description of the man and the traumatic event that led her to flee. "This gives us something concrete to work with," the detective said, jotting down notes in a notebook. "We'll review the files and see if we find any matches with men who had records of suspicious activities around the time of Stella's disappearance." As they waited, the tension was palpable. Lucas tried to keep Stella calm, but he was struggling with his own anxiety. Every minute felt like an eternity. A few days later, the phone rang. It was the detective, his voice carrying a mix of urgency and triumph. "Lucas, I think we found something. We need you and your grandmother to come to the station immediately." When they arrived, the detective led them to a meeting room where several files were spread out on the table. "We found records of a man who matches Stella's description. He had a history of minor crimes, but nothing that kept him locked up for long. However, there's something more recent." He pointed to a photo. "This is João Mota. He was arrested a few years ago for attempted kidnapping in another city. The circumstances are frighteningly similar to what Stella described." Stella looked at the photo and shuddered. "It's him, I'm sure. Those eyes I'll never forget." The detective continued. "João Mota is currently serving a sentence, but with this new information we can reopen Stella's disappearance case and possibly connect him to other unsolved cases." Lucas felt a mix of relief and anger. What can we do now? How can we make sure he pays for this? "The first step is to have Stella formally identify João Mota in a lineup. After that, we can work with the prosecution to ensure he is held accountable for his crimes," the detective explained. The visit to the prison was emotionally draining. Stella was visibly nervous but determined to confront her past. As she looked at João Mota through the glass, her resolve only strengthened. "It's him," she said firmly. "He's the man who tried to kidnap me." With this formal identification, the detective promised to do everything in his power to ensure João Mota was prosecuted, not only for his past crimes, but also for the trauma he caused Stella and potentially other victims. Back at home, Lucas and Stella sat at the kitchen table, a heavy silence between them. Finally, Stella spoke. "I feel like a big part of me is healing, Lucas. Knowing that he will be punished gives me a sense of justice." Lucas took her hand. "We did this together, Grandma, and we'll continue facing whatever comes next together." The following days were filled with meetings with lawyers, testimonies, and preparation for the trial. Each step brought them closer to the truth and justice. Stella showed more strength than ever, confronting her fears and traumas with admirable courage. When the trial finally took place, Lucas and Stella were ready. João Mota was convicted. and justice was finally served. The truth had been uncovered, and with it came healing for wounds that had long been open. The future now seemed brighter, and although the scars of the past would never completely disappear, Stella and Lucas knew they had something stronger than any pain. They had each other, and the certainty that together, they could overcome any challenge. After the revelation and the justice finally achieved, Stella and Lucas faced a new challenge: Stella's persistent amnesia. While some fragments of memory had returned, there were still significant gaps that left a painful void in her life. Determined to recover as many of her memories as possible, Stella began attending regular therapy sessions with a specialist in memory disorders. Lucas accompanied her to every appointment, offering support and encouragement. In one of those sessions, the therapist suggested using reminiscence techniques, a method that involves reconstructing memories through sensory and emotional stimuli. Let's try using objects, photos, even music that might evoke significant memories, the therapist explained. Stella and Lucas decided to start at home. They opened old photo albums and found mementos ranging from Lucas's childhood to special family moments. Each photo was a gateway to the past, and some of them began to awaken dormant memories in Stella. "Look at this one, Lucas," Stella said, pointing to a photo of them at an amusement park. "I remember this day. You were so excited to ride the roller coaster for the first time. I was so scared, but your joy gave me courage." "But your joy," Lucas smiled. "I remember, Grandma. It was one of the best days of my life." In addition to the photos, Stella began revisiting places that had been important to her. One afternoon, Lucas took her to the old family church where many significant events had taken place. As they entered, Stella felt a wave of familiarity. "This is where we got married," she murmured, emotional. "And where you were baptized, Lucas." Music also played a crucial role in the process. Lucas found an old record player and some vinyl records that belonged to Stella. When he played one of her favorite songs, a smile lit up her face. "This is the song I used to dance to with your grandfather." The journey was challenging and not always rewarding. There were days when Stella felt frustrated by the slow progress, the gaps in her memory seeming like insurmountable chasms. On one of those nights, she confided in Lucas, "I feel like I'll never be the same person. There's so much I still can't remember." Lucas embraced her tenderly. "You don't need to be the same person, Grandma. You're amazing just as you are now. And I'm here with you, every step of the way." They also sought support from groups for families of people with amnesia. Stella found comfort in sharing her story and hearing others, realizing that she wasn't alone in her struggle. Progress, though slow, began to become more noticeable. In one therapy session, Stella managed to remember a lullaby she used to sing to Lucas when he was a baby. She sang softly, and Lucas felt tears streaming down his face as he recognized the melody. Each small victory was celebrated with joy. While the complete memory might never return, Stella and Lucas learned to cherish every recovered fragment, every present moment, and every new memory they were building together. The challenge of amnesia wasn't just about recovering the past, but also about building a new future filled with hope and love. And with each passing day, Stella and Lucas grew stronger, united by their unbreakable family bond and the certainty that, regardless of the missing memories, they would always have each other. It was a spring afternoon, and the garden at Lucas's house was in full bloom. The roses that Stella loved so much were blooming, filling the air with a sweet, nostalgic fragrance. Lucas had prepared a small picnic in the garden, a gesture of affection to celebrate the progress his grandmother had made in recovering her memories. Stella was sitting in a wicker chair watching the flowers with a serene smile on her face. "Lucas, these roses remind me of happy times," she said, her eyes shining with a mix of joy and longing. Lucas approached and draped a blanket over her shoulders. "That's why I wanted to have this picnic here, Grandma, to celebrate every memory we've recovered and all the new ones we're making." They sat together, enjoying the sandwiches and tea Lucas had prepared. Stella looked around, taking in every detail of the garden, when suddenly a specific memory seemed to come back to her. "Lucas, do you remember that swing on the tree? I used to push you so high you almost touched the branches." Lucas laughed. "Yes, I remember. I always asked to go higher. You were always worried, but you let me go anyway. Stella smiled, her hands gently holding the teacup. I wanted you to feel the freedom, the joy of being a child. Those moments were precious to me. Suddenly, the garden gate opened and an elderly man entered, leaning on a cane. Stella looked at him, her eyes wide with surprise and recognition. "Carlos?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The man smiled, tears in his eyes. "Stella, my dear Stella, it's me." Lucas watched, moved as his grandmother got up and ran to embrace the man. Carlos was Stella's husband and Lucas's grandfather, whom they had thought was lost forever. He had spent years searching for Stella, never giving up hope of finding her. "I searched for you everywhere," Carlos said, holding Stella tightly. "I never lost hope that one day I would find you." Stella cried tears of joy, her tears mingling with Carlos's. "I never lost hope either. I was lost, but now I'm home." They sat in the garden, sharing stories, laughter, and tears. Carlos talked about his relentless search, the obstacles he faced, and the indescribable joy of finally finding Stella. She in turn shared her journey to recover her memories, the pain of being lost and the joy of each small victory with Lucas by her side. As the afternoon turned into evening, the atmosphere remained bright with love and reconnection. The stars shone in the sky, reflecting the light in Stella and Carlos's eyes as they danced to an old song, a melody that brought back so many special moments. Lucas watched his grandparents dancing, feeling a deep sense of peace. They had faced unimaginable challenges, but the emotional reunion proved that love and hope could overcome any obstacle. As the night went on, the garden was filled with laughter and shared stories. Stella and Carlos's reunion was a testament to the strength of family, the power of memory, and the beauty of never giving up on those we love. And so, under the starry sky and surrounded by the flowers Stella cherished so much, Lucas, Stella, and Carlos celebrated not only their reunion, but also the eternal love that had kept them together through time and adversity. Comment below what you would do, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this.